Happy Bitcoin Friday, freaks. It's your host, Odell, here for another Citadel Dispatch, the show focused on actionable Bitcoin and freedom tech discussion. Thank you for joining me for a whirlwind week at Bitcoin Park, Open Source Week here. I know I've been dumping a lot of rips on you guys, a lot of content. I hope you get through it at your leisure. I hope you find it very helpful and enjoyable. We're not done for the week yet. I have a great show. We're about to have a great conversation with Steve Lee, but before I get to that, we also have a show with Casey Rod Armor to talk about all this ordinal inscription situation on Sunday right before the Super Bowl. So consider joining us for that. That will be fun. There might be another dispatch in between that. I really have no idea. I like just pulling people into the studio when we have so many great people in Nashville. But before we get started, once again, you guys know the deal. Dispatch is 100% audience funded. We have no ads or sponsors. You guys support the show. You make it possible. It is extremely rewarding building a show that way, proper value for value. So I thank you all who continue to support the show. Obviously, you can support the show by going to citadeldispatch.com. All the relevant links are there. You can all donations, everything's Bitcoin funded. So whether that's Lightning, on-chain, BIP47 reusable payment codes, my pay name is Odell. All of that helps. Thank you so much for supporting. You can also support through Podcasting 2.0 apps, whether that's streaming sats. You basically pick how many sats per minute you think the show is worth, and it streams directly to my node. I see those sats just streaming into my node. Or if it's through something called Boostergrams, where you attach a message to a set amount of sats. And what I do every week, I mean, who even knows how often I do dispatches now? It's like 5, 10 in a week and then skip 4 weeks. But every dispatch, I read the top 4 boostergrams from the last episode. Of course, the last episode was less than 24 hours ago, but we already have some boostergrams in, which is pretty impressive. Thank you, freaks. We have at Deuce Denton saying, thanks for the signal. Stay humble, stack sats. We have Ape Mithrandur with 7,778 sats. NVK needs to chill. He is still new to the podcast scene and should respect the host a bit more. Yeah, now that he's a competing podcaster, it's important that he dunks on me every episode he comes on. We got at Rika Maru with 7,777 sats saying, Apple M2, sellout Odell. Real Bitcoiners use 14-year-old ThinkPads with core boot. Joking, brother. Enjoy those silky smooth loading times. I have to say, the M2 is in a league of its own, and it's extremely useful when producing this show. I do not have a producer, never had a producer, do everything in-house myself, and it's pretty amazing how powerful it is for how light it is. Kind of blown away, to be honest. And the battery life is great. I could do a whole dispatch without plugging it in, which is crazy, especially coming from my System 76 Linux laptop. At Sean Toshi 21M with 200 sats, great content. So thank you, freaks, for supporting the show. Once again, I know it's a bear market. I know it's a recession. If you can't spare any sats, I completely understand. You can also support the show by joining the live chat, whether that's in Twitch, YouTube, or Matrix. Our Matrix live chat is actually 24/7, 365. Really great discussion that we have in there. So it's not just when the show's going on. Also, subscribing on your favorite platform. Every podcast app is supported. Sharing with friends and family, leaving reviews. All these things help. Your support is appreciated. Okay. Thank you, Steve, for standing by there for my 4-minute intro. Thank you, freaks. We have Steve Lee in the studio. I recorded with Steve last year, pretty much almost exactly a year. I think it's been 14 months. Steve obviously leads Spiral at Block, formerly Square. And we will be talking about a variety of things, including building secure mobile wallets, but also the various Spiral initiatives. How's it going, Steve? Good morning.
It's going great. Great to be back. Nice to do it in person as well.
It's always better in person.
Better in person. Also Nashville. It's my first time to Nashville.
Ever.
Welcome. So first time to Bitcoin Park. And I mean, the whole Spiral team is here, and all but one of us first time in Nashville. We've had a great week.
It's an honor and privilege to host you.
Yeah, I mean, the hype was real about Bitcoin Park, but it's exceeded even that hype.
We try not to hype it too much. We just love when people come and visit us.
I definitely recommend Bitcoiners come visit Nashville and Bitcoin Park.
And it's ideal setup for an offsite, right?
Yeah. I was just talking about that with our team. The Spiral team tries to get together around 3 times a year in person, since we're distributed all over the place. And in the past, we've piggybacked off of conferences, which worked well. We met in Atlanta for TabConf. TabConf also is a great conference.
It's amazing.
Really, really good conference. But it's also pretty energy draining to both do a pretty intense 3-day conference and a 3-day team offsite. So this week we had a couple nice events, with the Nashville Bit Devs, and there were a couple night events, which gave good community feel, met new people. But it's not as intense as like a 3-day full-on conference. So it's been a really good week. Well, and I didn't know that Nashville was renowned for curling.
Yeah, you guys all went curling last night, right?
We all went curling, and all but one of us, it was our first time. There were like 5 or 6 of us who had never even seen curling before. So those folks were definitely in for a surprise for what a unusual sport it is. But it was a ton of fun. One person is actually Canadian and plays twice a week.
Wow.
Thunder Biscuit.
Did he tell you that before or after you started playing?
We got hints before that there was a ringer. No, but I highly recommend it as a team event, because like it's approachable for everyone, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, I love to hear it, and I love these physical spaces. I want to see them, pop up all around the world. And for me, Rod and Josh at Bitcoin Park, like I said, honor and a privilege to host you guys. You guys are doing great work, and to me, it's the least we can do. So it's been just a great week. So obviously, I've had the BDK team on this week. I've had Val and Jeff from LDK, and now we're capping you off with a Spiral trifecta of the week. So where do you want to start, Steve?
How about we start, so a year ago when we did this, yeah, I sort of gave an update of like the past 2.5 years of Spiral, the first 2.5 years of Spiral. How about we just start with like what Spiral's done in the past year?
That's great. So what has Spiral done in the last year?
One thing, we have a really robust grant program. We've given out over 60 grants to people in 20 different countries. So we're really excited about what we've done there. And I believe every single one of those grantees, it was their first time being funded for open source Bitcoin work.
That's amazing.
So definitely proud of bringing like really talented people into open source Bitcoin. What we've observed the past year, though, now that we're like 3 years into it, we have a couple successful outcomes. One are projects that are on their way to be sustainable, and we can go through those in a minute. But the second one is that we now have an alumni base of Spiral grantees, and they're going on to do even bigger and better things. We have a couple folks that have joined Block full time. We have someone who joined Voltage full time. We had, Stephen Delorme just joined Voltage.
I love Stephen.
He's amazing. He's been here this week too. It's been great. And then we have, Justin Moon is an alum, and he's gone on to co-found Fedi.
One of the hottest startups in the space.
Yeah. So, and there's, and like, John's Bahari has done really awesome stuff with Bolt.fun, and yeah, so it's really great to see people who went through the program aren't part of the program anymore, but they're doing even better things in Bitcoin. People are staying in Bitcoin.
Do you guys, Bolt.fun is amazing. Do you guys do any funding do you fund Bolt.fun as well, or no?
We haven't yet, okay, but we're definitely,
I've dropped
fans and cheerleaders.
With OpenSats, I've dropped the ball a little bit on Bolt.fun. I promised him that I was going to help support that, and so John, if you're listening.
Yeah, and I think
it's a priority.
I mean, last fall, I thought what they did there was phenomenal. It's hard to we can talk about some of the challenges of development in
Yeah.
Bitcoin, but it's hard to get a lot of groups of developers doing an extended hackathon,
Right.
and he did a great job. A lot of great
Yeah.
projects.
It was deliberate, and he pulled it off.
Yeah. So so we're happy with this sort of new revelation that our the folks that went through the grant program are doing great things.
Which is what you want. You want a pipeline, basically.
Yep.
You don't want to be. You don't want people. You want to teach a man how to fish, not feed them fish every day.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also folks that we've that are doing great work, and they want to continue working on their projects. So we're renewing them, and that's sort of like is a good segue into Spiral had a post. It's almost a year, maybe 9 months ago, about our view on creating sustainable, like a framework for sustainable open source Bitcoin projects. Because we've funded now on the order of 8 to 10 different projects. Sometimes we're funding the project directly. Sometimes we're funding individuals to start projects. But a common problem or challenge in open source is that maybe a developer starts a project, great idea, makes good headway, and then it just doesn't see adoption.
Right.
And it could be due to just, that developer doesn't spend their time marketing it, or maybe that developer isn't going out sort of doing the PM work of like understanding customer requirements to really get a good fit. Or maybe they move on to something else, and then it just sort of dies and doesn't go anywhere. We think every project we're funding is going to be valuable to Bitcoin. We'd like to see it succeed. So we wrote this post. It's not that long, but it just walks through like 4 different phases. First phase, sort of the seed stage. It's often 1 developer, maybe 2. They have a great idea. Fund them to start coding and seed that project, get it going, get it to like a prototype stage or a proof of concept stage. Then the next phase would be getting additional contributors. To turn this from like a 1-person show to a community project, attracting other developers, and that shows a sign of a maturity for that project too. Usually, you have to make it a little more approachable for other developers to understand the code, build tools, etc.
Documentation.
And then the next phase.
It's a big leap from 1 developer to like actually many contributors, right?
Yeah, and again, some developers naturally write a bunch of tests and docs, and others often don't.
Right.
So that's a big milestone. Then going to the next stage would be if in the case that Spiral is funding it, trying to find other funders as well. The Spiral team's highly attentive to, we don't want to be like the only one funding these projects. That's not a sustainable approach. That's not a healthy approach for Bitcoin. I think we think we're good actors in the space and doing good things, but it's just not healthy to depend on one source or one point of view.
Everything in Bitcoin we want to be distributed, including funding.
Yeah, absolutely. So that next stage is getting others to fund a project, and then I guess what we described as the last stage would be the project is so sustainable that Spiral could just back off, or whoever the original
or
funding,
disappear
completely.
Yeah,
and it doesn't skip a beat.
Right.
Now, I mean, one thing we talked about this week, Matt, is like, I mean, maybe there's another level beyond that, like some kind of new type of funding mechanism,
business model, some kind of open
new
source
business model
or something.
I think exploring all of those as experiments is super important too.
Right.
Anyway, so I think it's a good framework for everyone to look at and see and test. It's what we're following at Spiral. If others like it too, they can copy it. And then if you look at the projects we funded, you'll find them at all the different stages. So BTC Pay is the first project. It was the first grant we did. That was September 2019. So we renewed them in 2020, 2021,
4 years
22.
ago.
Yeah, so 4 years. Huge supporters of BTC Pay. Love the project, the mission, the people. So that was an easy decision then, and it continues to be an easy decision to support them. But what's great about Spiral is the first funder of the project, but they also set up an entity, a foundation, so that others could fund the project, and they have a governance model of like who gets to decide how those funds are dispersed.
And we support them through OpenStats now too.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And it works well. I think they've attracted 10 or so funders over time. So it's great that it's not just Spiral. It's like 10 different funders. Now they've also, it's not been perfect either. Like not all 10 of those funders renew every year. But still achieving 10 funders is really
massive,
really great. And some do renew. And so that is what I think most projects would want to aspire to, and unless they figure out a business model or an alternative.
BTC is kind of the gold standard of a non-Bitcoin core open source project in the space, I would say.
Yeah. And another thing I've observed is in the space is that a lot of other funders who are doing great things by funding open source Bitcoin, they often are only comfortable supporting Bitcoin Core. Because other projects, especially if they're nascent or brand new, if they don't have someone full-time or a technical Bitcoin person who has somewhat of a vision for where things should go or can go, or
right,
it feels a little risky funding a new project or funding like an unknown person. Like I said earlier, Spiral's funded new people, bring new talent to the space. It's definitely harder. You have to spend more time evaluating,
especially if you're a large company. You're putting yourself out there.
Yeah. And we can. I mean, we'll walk through some of the folks we've funded in projects, and one actually has been controversial, so we can talk about that one. And so, because other companies might only be comfortable at least starting to fund Bitcoin Core, that's also influenced how, like, Spiral has definitely we funded 5-6 developers on Core, but we don't sort of overweight there for a couple of reasons. One, the reason I just said,
there's already a lot of funding.
Secondly, if we don't want Spiral funding like the majority of Bitcoin Core, that's also an unhealthy balance.
Like it's a bit of a threat to the network. It's like the idea.
Yeah. I mean, in the past, like other organizations, there Chaincode, Blockstream, there's been
even if there's no influence, you don't want to give the appearance of influence to Bitcoin Core, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even an organization, individuals who are like 100% good ethos and good intentions, there's always bias.
Right.
Like one thing about people have applied for grants at Spiral that we've said no to, who are like phenomenal people and do great things, and some of them come back to me and rib me because they've gone on and done great things, and it's like, why didn't you give it a grant?
It's always difficult saying no.
And well, I mean, we're also like, we're not perfect at
no one is.
We're not perfect at picking folks. I mean, I'm pretty much everyone we have selected,
we're a pretty good track
we're really happy with, but there's definitely been really good people who have applied,
right,
that we didn't say yes to. And so that's another reason it's great to have other organizations who have other views on what's important to fund in Bitcoin.
So we have Sadamoto in the live chat. He's wondering, does Spiral only fund open source projects?
Yeah, only open source. And do
you think about the licenses at all? Does the license matter?
We do. It's never really been an issue. There's only one project that we had like a discussion about licenses, but
before you funded.
Yeah. Just because we tend to like MIT Apache. Like most Rust, a lot of we don't exclusively fund Rust projects, but most are Rust, and the Rust sort of default is to do dual license, both MIT and Apache,
which is extremely permissive license. You can do anything you want with the code.
Yeah, which is aligned with our philosophy.
Right. But I know specifically you have funded some GPL licenses, right, which are a little bit more restricted.
Which one?
Mempool, right?
Mempool, yeah. That's the one we.
Is that the only one?
And, yeah, and I think one reason it's a little different is it's like almost everything we fund is like protocol development, infrastructure, dev tools.
You want to be as least restrictive as possible.
Yeah, and we, and Mempool is more application. There is like an API, but so it's a little outside of what we usually fund. Yeah, so I think because of that, they have a little bit different considerations for license.
We have so Mempool streams during all my.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mempool.space streams during all the dispatches, so it's literally on the screen right now. But yeah. It's an awesome project.
And then, I mean, also with our thinking on funding, we just feel so fortunate that Block gives Spiral a really healthy budget for doing
Right.
what we think is amazing stuff for the space. And
Specifically, no strings attached.
no
to it, which
strings
is
attached.
Crazy, yeah.
And so we really don't want to
like a $50 billion company or something like that, right? It's impressive.
Yep. There's a lot of really impactful projects that don't have a natural business model.
Right.
And that's where we want to direct our dollars. So some people have applied or spoken to us about, they have a for-profit business. We're absolutely supportive of people creating startups for profit. We'd like to see that grow too. It's just like, that's not where Spiral dollars go. There's several VCs that are targeting Lightning development,
and including us at 1031.
Yeah, exactly. So we just feel like the entrepreneurship and venture capital model is proven to satisfy that.
Right.
So ours goes towards free open source.
That's great.
Projects. Yep. So and then I guess sort of underlying all this, a point I wanted to make is that there's more than just Bitcoin Core as a project in the space. Bitcoin Core, extremely important project.
Right.
It is the core of Bitcoin, especially the parts of Bitcoin Core that are consensus, peer-to-peer. It's the foundation for everything else. So it is the most important project, but it's not the only project. And I think a lot of developers who are new to space or are interested in contributing are maybe only aware of Bitcoin Core.
Right.
So I'd love to spread the word that there's a lot of other important projects. There's a lot of layer 2 protocols, Lightning and Fedimint and others that you can contribute to. There's multiple Lightning implementations. There's also other Lightning infrastructure projects that we funded that are important, like a Watchtower project and the VLS project, Validating Lightning Center project, which is a way to isolate signing Lightning transactions to its own separate computer and process.
And the Watchtower is Eye of Satoshi, right?
Eye of Satoshi, yeah. And so those projects are agnostic to which implementation they work with, but they're critical infrastructure projects for building robust, trust minimized Lightning applications. So,
and on that front too, I mean, I won't gender the person. I got to meet the person behind the Twitter account and the blog posts, and you guys do a really, really good job of just covering the open source ecosystem around Bitcoin and getting more exposure to not only the projects that you support, but also the tangential projects.
Not only gender, but we don't even know if it's human, because
might not be human.
4 black cats.
There you go.
But whoever or whatever it is, it might be in Nashville as well, and you met them.
That was fantastic. But yes,
it's also, we talked about the LDK film last podcast, and that person was
Puppet
also
Jack.
That person was also, I actually revealed that person's name in that podcast, but for someone who wants to go sleuth. But yeah, so there are a lot of projects that at least we believe are valuable, and I think a lot of developers in the space that have been contributing for a while appreciate that there's more than just Bitcoin Core. So anyone out there looking to get involved with open source as an engineer, or even as a non-engineer, designer, PM, biz dev type person, Bitcoin Core is not the only game in town in terms of contributing. And also funding. Strongly encourage funding entities to look at other projects that are important to Bitcoin.
Great.
Yeah, so let's get back to sort of what's happened in the past year with Spiral funded projects. Let's talk about Stratum V2.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So Stratum V2, people might have been hearing about it for years. Matt Corallo proposed better hash 4 or 5 years ago, and
then that morphed into Stratum V2.
Yeah, Jan and Pavel at Brains were working on a protocol proposal for Stratum V2. For folks that don't know what this is, there's a protocol called Stratum, which is between miners and mining pools. It's been around like 10 years. It's pretty much how mining, it's a core protocol for how mining works today. And as you might guess, with a protocol that's 10 years old, there's areas of improvement. ways to make it better. That's what Stratum V2 is. Matt's primary focus with Better Hash was around decentralizing mining, and specifically today the only entities that can do transaction selection are pools.
Right.
Miners actually don't do transaction
Which
selection.
transactions go in the block?
Yep.
Yep.
So if we want to talk, a core property of Bitcoin is censorship resistance, arguably the most important property.
Right.
And today it rests. There's many layers of censorship resistance, but a very important one rests with a few pools today. It's not super brittle because if pools did start censoring, it's very low switching costs for miners to switch.
Right. You have a soft check on them there. If they start acting malicious, they start not including transactions, and you leave and go to a different pool.
Yeah, but
it's
certainly stronger. Yeah. It's a stronger network, a healthier network if we have better decentralization of transactions.
And you're essentially giving regulators there's a person, there's a entity that they can go pressure and say, don't include these transactions in a block. Right?
Especially as the long time concern was concentration in China, which is a valid concern. Now we don't have that anymore, but now we have a new concern, which is arguably a lesser concern, but it's still a concern, which is too much in the United States, North America, public companies, more entity. There's more hash rate that's closer to U.S. Treasury than before. And if that grows too much, that gets to be a little
You
scary.
want it to be distributed as much as possible.
So Better Hash, which has now been bundled into Stratum V2. Though Matt and Jan and Pavel did a great job working together to merge their ideas and their proposals into one proposal, which is Stratum V2. That happened in September 2019 in Prague. And so now we're in 2023. So what's happened since then? A little over 2 years ago, so Brains has gone ahead and they've implemented
everything except the job negotiation.
Yes. So Stratum V2 has several sub protocols. Brains has implemented all but the job negotiation, which is the part that allows miners to do
the individual miners to construct the transaction, the blocks,
which
transactions.
All of the improvements are important, but arguably it's definitely the most important for decentralization.
Right.
They have not done that yet, but they've done the other stuff. So they've actually deployed that, and as long
the other improvements are good for efficiency and they're good for security. Yeah.
Yeah, they Stratum V2 adds authentication and encryption.
Right, we're just plain text communicating with the Stratum servers.
I think Matt Corallo demonstrated before hijacking hash rate.
They're just man in the middle between the miner and the pool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just all of this is just decidedly better.
Right.
It's just a matter of building it, testing it, make sure it's high quality.
And arguably the job negotiation part is the most difficult part.
Yeah. It is both to build and to deploy.
Yeah, because individual miners have to actually run their own nodes now if they want to participate.
So so Brains has done some of the work. It's there's some miners that are using Brains firmware, and Brains Pool, formerly known as Slush Pool, does support Stratum V2. So part of it's live, but all of us, including Brains, wants to see much broader adoption. We want to see the network go to 100%, and we want to see job negotiation being adopted.
And if I'm correct with Brain's current implementation, you need to essentially be run. There's two main manufacturers. One is Bitmain, the other is MicroBT that makes the What's miners. You need to run Brain's custom firmware to do Stratum V2 because those two manufacturers don't ship it in their stock firmware yet, and that only is available on Ant miners on. Yeah,
that's my understanding too.
Yeah.
I think at least as of last fall, that was true.
So not only do you have to be using Brains Pool, but you also need to be running an Ant miner that has Brains OS on it.
So it's good that it's not zero. There's some of it's out there, real world usage. That's always a good proof point, but we're still very early phases. So a little over 2 years ago, Spiral funded a developer who goes by FI3 to work on an independent implementation of Stratum V2.
Cool.
Because there's a little bit of concern with both from I think the folks at Brains and from Matt Corallo, me, and others that the industry perceived Brains implementation as being like, they're a for-profit company,
Right.
so not
And a
being
mining pool
not being
themselves.
and a mining pool, so
Yeah.
not they have their own vested interest. Those guys I think have like super strong
Right.
Bitcoin ethos, but
Still.
they're still right. So we funded FI3 to work on an independent implementation, and he's been working on that for over 2 years. Then along the way, like a year and a half ago, Rachel joined that project. I don't know if folks know Rachel, but she's at Galaxy, and she started contributing and did a lot of great work for the project.
Awesome.
And now, now the project has like more than half a dozen people contributing. So again, that sort of
I think
growth.
Foundry's gotten involved, which is the
Foundry's got
largest US
Foundry's got
pool.
Foundry's gotten involved. They funded another developer to work on Job Negotiator.
Right.
There's several companies and a lot of developers involved.
So
So
we're about to fund. I don't know. Through OpenSats, we're about to fund Stratum V2 as well.
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another success. I mean, it's still not all the way there, but it's a success story in terms of attracting multiple developers, multiple funders, and the project has good momentum. Like Pavlinex, also a lot of people probably know Pavlinex in the space. Spiral funds him, and he's a non-developer. So he's a. I mean, another thing I'd give a shout out for is like if you're not a developer, you can absolutely contribute and do really positive things for open source.
I mean, he's one of the reasons BTC Pay was so successful, and now he's taken Stratum V2 under his wing.
And in between, Bitcoin design community got involved. So
and he's launching a Bitcoin Park in Croatia, his version of Bitcoin Park in Croatia, which is great.
Yeah. So anyone who's not a coder but wants to help out and is kind of it's nebulous or you can't really figure out how to
Right.
just he's a good example to model after, and you don't have to do exactly what he's done, but he's found ways to add a lot of value.
Let him inspire you, and also he's always happy to give feedback and help you along your way too.
Yep. In fact, I mean, quick tangent there. He actually helped, or he started a new Discord and a new community, the Bitcoin product community, doing exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
He wanted to.
He's amazing.
He wanted to help other folks. Connor and Haley from my team have joined. I've joined. Adam Jonas from Chain Code and Mike Schmidt, a bunch of people who have done a lot of great things in the space. None of us either we're not engineers or we're not actively coding, but we find other ways to help.
Yeah, I already knew Connor, absolute legend, but Haley's amazing.
Yeah,
she's really amazing. First time meeting her.
Yeah, so that anyone interested in contributing in a non-coding way, but kind of has no idea how to start, join that Discord.
How do you find the Discord?
That's a good question.
You just
you can all. I mean, people can DM me on Twitter. I'm Moneyball. I'll send out.
It's called Bitcoin Product Community.
Yeah,
is that what it is?
We should. Do you have show notes or something?
Yeah, I can put it in the show notes.
We can give you an invite link.
Perfect.
Yeah. Anyway, Pavlinex is involved in Stratum V2, and yeah, he's helping steer the ship like a good PM does, and a good PM is not the authority of a project.
Right.
Good PM respects all the contributors in the project, knows that they're not the boss, but they just help. They find ways to help organize. They find gaps, holes, weaknesses, plug them, find other talented people to fill in, and that's exactly what he does really well. And yeah, people love Pavlinex. So Stratum V2, where's it at now? So it's now matured tremendously in terms of the code, the quality. It's at a point now where people can start using it. I wouldn't recommend a miner or pool put a lot of machines on it yet, but it's absolutely ready for running on a machine, getting familiar with it. And I think, with a period of time to do that testing, work out remaining kinks for production, it's conceivable that later this year you could actually move some material hash rate onto it. Now, you mentioned earlier that the only firmware that exists for Stratum V2 is Brains, and it only works on certain machines. But one thing that this open source project has done, and it's called SRI, Stratum Reference Implementation is the name of the open source project. SRI has created a proxy. So mining machines that are running Stratum V1 firmware, which is pretty much every machine, can still do Stratum V2 by running this proxy at the mining site.
Got it.
so it can talk to a Stratum v2 pool, and you get the benefits of
Oh, so you don't have to run the
security.
firmware or
No,
anything. It just flips
all
it.
existing equipment
That's huge.
can get all the benefits of Stratum v2.
That's
You can get the
awesome.
security benefits. You can also do your own transaction selection. Um, Also interesting is that the way that architecture works for transaction selection, a third party can run Bitcoin Core and do transaction selection. So it doesn't even have to be the pool or the miner.
They
It can
could
be
just all they do is do transaction selection. They offer it as a service, maybe.
Yep. So just I don't know what the future holds, but I just know that with Stratum v1, it architecturally the only option is the pool. And now anyone can do transaction selection. So hopefully that is good for decentralization. It's not a silver bullet.
Right.
But I mean, it at least provides options.
It's also one of those things that even the way I kind of think about it in my head is even if it's not fully rolled out, um, if there's a situation where censorship starts, the fact that it exists will mean that people can quickly move to it if they need to.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned earlier, it means a miner would have to run a full node
Right.
or connect to a third party that is. But I think that that's going to be an operational hurdle. But I also think there'll be products coming onto the market that make it easier for miners to do that.
I mean, we have .eths are running full nodes now so that they can scribe NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain. Like, I think miners can figure it out if they need to.
Yeah, and I think that I know like Block itself has a new mining initiative where they're designing their own custom ASIC.
Yes.
They're
Very
designing
excited.
rigs. It's all going to be open. Super excited about that. There's tremendous progress on that.
That's separate from Spiral, but
Separate from Spire.
Yeah.
That's a commercial effort at the company.
awesome. Yeah.
But the great thing about the commercial efforts at Block is strong Bitcoin ethos, and generally, to the extent the company can make it open.
All the way from the top. Like Dorsey really believes in Bitcoin.
Jack definitely
Yeah.
Jack definitely does.
I have to call him Dorsey
Dorsey
because we have
Jack
Maulers
Mal.
too.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it
right.
gets very confusing.
Yeah, and I mean, jumping to that really quickly. What I've been at the company now, going on 4 years, and I've seen a lot of Bitcoin ethos grow within the company too. I mean, the way Jack runs the company, just because he's a big believer in Bitcoin, doesn't
Right.
mean the entire thousands of people at the company
Right.
all are
Of course not.
as strong of Bitcoiners as you, me, or him, or like the folks on Spiral. But when I joined, there's an internal Bitcoin Slack channel, and there were like 30 people on it when I joined, and now there's like 1,500 or 2,000 people on it.
Whoa.
It's grown tremendous. The interest is very high, and I think we've also seen a shift, not only in interest. I mean, because there's the interest is not all like positive.
Right.
There's
Of course.
there's curious and there's skeptics, which I think you're going to find in any big tech company.
It's healthy.
And it's healthy.
Yeah.
It's healthy, but we've seen a shift from there's curious people have turned into like Bitcoin advocates, and also there's more and more commercial projects and products within the company now. And there's those teams generally have a good balance of hiring some external people with Bitcoin development experience, but also others that are new. And I think that's a really healthy mix as well. It creates really good, good questions during the development of products. But the Bitcoin mining initiative at Block, they certainly have Stratum v2 in mind. They're going to support Stratum v2. And I think it's certainly in their interest to make it easy for miners to run a full node and improve the user experience for miners when they're getting rigs, buying
Right.
rigs. Yeah, so Stratum v2, I'm super bullish on it. Like 3 years ago, I loved the proposal and the tech side of it and the promise, but I was worried about adoption.
Right.
I'm less worried about adoption now. It's still a challenge. Miners have to run a full node. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
Why
Whenever there's friction added, it always
like
makes it more
what is the incentive? For I guess a new insight for pools. I was always wondering, like, why would pools? The only incentive I thought would be like if miners demand it, pools will emerge that support
competition. Yeah.
competition. But I think even existing pools will have an incentive, especially if their compliance team might
Right.
actually want them
I mean,
to
you
do.
see that with Foundry, like, they wanna reduce that regulatory risk, right?
Yep.
Because if they are forced to censor, then all of a sudden their business model dies because everyone will well, a lot of people will move to a different pool.
Right. So if you're a US pool, like them, you might have a interest in not selecting
Right.
transactions. So I think there'll be natural incentives to distribute that more.
Which is important.
Yep. Um, let's talk about Fedimint. I mean, in terms of last year, Fedimint's really come onto the scene. And it's been, it's a new project. It's an exciting project. I'm a huge supporter of it. Spiral has funded 3 developers now. I guess 2 have been announced. 1 will be announced soon.
Awesome.
For that. And again, it's
I
important.
met one of them. I'm not gonna say who, but
Oh, great. Yeah,
thank you for funding it.
well, the 3 we funded all have like fantastic backgrounds. They're all super enthusiastic about Fedimint. I mean, at least a couple of them left like high paying,
Very high paying jobs, yes.
big tech company jobs because they're so mission driven. So it's just, yeah, all these folks are amazing. But it's important for everyone to keep in mind, Fedimint is an open source protocol.
Right.
And the 3 developers that we're funding, and like Eric, who started the project, they are focused on open source Fedimint.
Right.
And hopefully
Their
there's
protocol.
lots of applications built on that, lots of clients, lots of companies built. Separately, there's a company, Fedi, which Obi and Justin Moon co-founded.
With Eric.
And with Eric.
Yeah.
But I think like Justin's definitely involved with the open source work, but I think, Justin and Obi, they're trying to build a business. So it's important to keep those 2 separate in people's minds, but I think it's great that there's
Right. Eric's the co-founder, but he's mostly right now he's mostly focused on the open source protocol work.
Yep. And I'm super excited for what Fedi will do. I'm an investor as well, and I really believe.
Same.
Yeah, I'm a believer in that.
Disclosure.
I also hope there's many competitors to Fedi, right? Like for a healthy protocol, it's not going to be just one company. Otherwise, it's not really an open protocol.
Just to be clear, the way the audience can conceptualize like where Fedi comes into the Fedimint open source protocol is Fedi's essentially a front end app to the open protocol. So ideally, we would see many front end apps for that protocol.
Yep, and hopefully this year. Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to launch sooner than later, and like get some proof points, get some adoption,
right,
show some real success, and that'll attract competitors. And I
already know of at least 2 teams that are working on another front end. So
that's great.
Yeah,
and yeah, I guess the reason I'm excited about Fedimint, it's number 1 is privacy and just eCash. The concept, I love that it's finally being applied to Bitcoin.
Right.
So it's a way for people to have really, really strong privacy with a good user experience.
Right.
And the second thing is scaling, because as much of a proponent of Lightning as I am, and Spiral is, and we invest a lot of resources on it, and we're going to talk about it on this show. It's we still don't have a long-term scaling plan for billions of people, machine to machine payments with Lightning. So maybe hopefully we figured that out over time, but we might not. And the great thing about Fedimint, it can scale to everyone on the planet. It also interoperates really nicely with Lightning. It doesn't compete with Lightning. It actually enhances Lightning,
right? And
Lightning enhances it. So I see a lot of synergies between those.
It's very complementary,
but it's not perfect. Everything has trade-offs. It is custodial,
right?
So there's. I think we're both huge proponents of non-custodial,
right?
Trust minimized, self-sovereign usage of Bitcoin. That's where most of Spiral's resources and budget goes towards. And so it's a trade-off with Fedimint.
Well, Fedimint's like one of the reasons that Fedimint's a cool project to me is that it's very pragmatic, right? First of all, it doesn't need any changes to Bitcoin. Second of all, it is right. It is custodial, but it is reduced custodial risk from the purely custodial. Like right now, we see a lot of people using Wallet of Satoshi. We see a lot of people using Binance, these fully custodial wallets. But with Fedimint, you have this idea of essentially like a multi-sig custodian where you would need multiple people, multiple entities to come together to essentially exit scam and take your money, right?
Yep. And the types of people who would be those custodians or guardians can be very different. So
Right.
yeah, so if you're, FTX, if you're like in the Bahamas and your coins are with someone you have no relationship to and don't
Right.
know at all, like it's you obviously you can see the risks that happened in the past year and actually throughout the history of
Right.
Bitcoin.
I hope we don't
Lots of exit
explain that right
scams.
now.
But with Fedimint, not only can you have like a 5 of 7 in which you need at least 5 people to collude, but
To take the money.
if you're doing it in a community where a lot of communities around the world, you have generation upon generation of people who stay in that community.
Right.
And their family name and reputation means something. Their personal reputation means something. So there's a strong incentive not to screw people over.
And that's specifically a massive priority of the Fedimint open source project is that it's easy. Like it's not everyone can just launch a wallet of Satoshi, right? But it needs to be easy for these small communities to just spin up their own Fedimints, and you'll have many different Fedimints of different sizes and different trade-offs and whatnot, right?
Yeah. So I think the ideal outcome there is that there's thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions of
Right.
Fedimints around the world. They're all small scale.
I mean, you could
And
even have one that's like just your family, right? And like that's,
yeah.
Maybe you use it for larger amounts, and then the community one you use for slightly less amounts, and then the big continent-wide one you use for even smaller amounts.
Yeah. So I'm super excited about that future. And again, there's no altcoin or
Right.
it's using Bitcoin.
Sats.
Bitcoin is money. You just send and receive Bitcoin. It's compatible with Lightning. It's compatible with the Bitcoin network.
Right.
Lightning
That's the key,
network.
because you can send between the different Fedimints using Bitcoin, using Lightning. It's the
Yeah,
interoperability layer.
I could be a user that's never heard of Fedimint, don't know
Right.
nothing about it, but I can send and receive money with you, and you're
Yeah, you can pay me for your full node using Zeus to my Fedimint wallet. Boom, done.
Yeah.
Using Lightning.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about WalletScrutiny, which is the project that I mentioned a little bit controversial. And before the show, you said you had maybe some concerns about it.
Yes.
Let me describe the project, why Spiral's excited about it, why I'm excited about it, and why I think it's important for the space, and why I think this particular project can do a lot of good for the space. So if people not familiar with WalletScrutiny, it's been around 3, maybe 4 years. The idea behind it is that even if you do self-custody, you're using a mobile wallet, you're still, you've eliminated a lot of risks, but you also introduce new risks. And some risks are that even if that project is open source and you can look at the code and might have a trusted friend who's an engineer who's looked at it and says it's good, you actually don't know if the binary from the app store on your phone matches
is what you're running.
It could be, there could be a man in the middle attack, whether it's Apple or a third party or the wallet developers themselves, or even if the wallet developers are earnest, their computer could be hacked.
Right.
So they could, be as super high integrity, but if their computer's hacked, then all bets are off. So the devastating scenario is a wallet that becomes very popular. Millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions people are using it. And there's like a 0-day type of attack where everyone's wallet is swept in one moment. That would be very bad. So the goal of WalletScrutiny is to help reduce that risk by really focusing on reproducible builds.
Right.
Reproducible builds, for people not familiar with it, is when an independent party can take the source code that's open source, build the software, and confirm that the binary they produce is the exact same that was digitally signed and what you're running on your phone. It's technical process. It's complicated. Trying to do this across hundreds of or even thousands of projects is enormous task. But that's what this project is set out to do.
Right.
And then the project tries to, categorize each wallet and communicate to users if there's any concerns. So I think it's an important problem, I think, for the
Right.
space to solve.
100% agree.
The intention of the project, I think, is really good. And um, I've gotten to know the folks involved in it I met Leo like 3 years ago, gotten to know them over time, as well as several other people have been working with them. I think they're very earnest and trying to do the right thing. So I'm excited about this project. Are there areas of improvement? Absolutely. And others have let me know that. I've seen it myself, but I've listened to others. So I'm excited to go fix those. For one, any project like this is naturally going to be controversial in the space
Right.
because it's a little bit antagonistic to to wallets, right?
Right. To
As
developers.
to develop wallet developers and wallets. You don't want to be scrutinized, or most people don't want to be scrutinized. So it's just naturally going to be contentious for that reason. If you feel like it's unfair scrutiny or it is unfair scrutiny,
Right.
then you definitely are not going to like it. And I think one challenge the project has had, I think they've reviewed like literally over 1,000 projects
Right.
with a very small team of volunteers who are not paid. So it's just been like way too much work for a few people who aren't paid. Hopefully with funding, it can attract more people. But I do think there's like a quantity challenge that they've had, like too many projects, not enough resources. I think that's one challenge. And I also think that the design of the website and the copy can be improved so that it is
Kind of scares the shit out of a lot of
it
people.
scares the shit out of people.
Yeah.
So
Like the average end user when they go to the website.
right. And it's a really tricky balance though, because you also do want to scrutinize. It's a tricky balance. So you need to balance like doing what's right for the user and being transparent and communicating important information to them so they can make a good decision. You don't want to go out of your way to be adversarial to wallets, because
Right.
most of these wallets and wallet devs are absolutely trying to do the right
Right.
thing. And also there's no perfect wallet.
And a lot of them don't have their own business models, so they're
Yeah,
just pure open source
right.
projects that
And
they're basically contributing their time and energy to develop
and,
and maintain.
and if we walk through every wallet, both of us could find flaws in every wallet.
Right.
There's no perfect wallet. So if it's easy to point out or find flaws, point them out and highlight those and scare people away. And then you have to ask yourself, what if this mobile wallet that checks 8 of 10 boxes, is that really, do you want to scare people away from that? And then they just keep their coins on, an
Right.
exchange. Like,
Or even worse, like,
I
I
think
mean,
no.
I had Sergey on from Bitrefill, right? And one of the most commonly used wallets there is Trust Wallet by Binance, and like that's even far like reproducibilities are great, but they use a reusable Bitcoin address. It's just like a one fixed address.
Right.
Uh,
So
there's a disconnect
it's
there.
a really hard problem because it's not a simple like thumbs up or thumbs down answer to any of these wallets. There's just a lot of nuance, a lot of trade-offs. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm optimistic because um, we reached out to the Bitcoin design community to see if they would help with this project.
Right.
And we got an amazing response from the design community because they saw the importance of this project. They saw the seeds of something that could be really valuable, but they also saw ways that they can help. And so several people from the design community have been working for the past few months on the project. And also Spiral's copywriter, who does all of our copy for our tweets and website, and our creative person, he's helping as well on the copy for that site. So I think we're going to see a lot of improvements there. And also the goal of that project is not have it just be one person, like the founder of the project, not to just have him be the only one behind it. Like he doesn't want to be the dictator of all these reviews.
I mean, I think that's where a lot of the concerns lie.
Yeah, and so he doesn't want that. He doesn't want to have that responsibility. We don't. Spiral doesn't either. And so, hopefully, with funding now and more resources, and just more people in the community knowing about and helping out, we're going to get more expert opinions, more contributors to the project, and it becomes less about one person's personal review on every project
Right.
and much more of a community feel.
That's good.
So I think if we can achieve these, so I think we're in a good spot in that there's awareness of some of the problems and challenges. There's a plan to address them. So let's see how that turns out.
Well, so I'll just say my piece really quick. First of all, I mean, it's an important goal. It's an important mission. Uh, I my my concerns have mostly been, um, the maintainer. There feels like there's a little bit of bad faith that happens. It feels um, like we said earlier, like it really scares the shit out of people from otherwise very, very good wallets that have very strong code bases that they really care about security. You mentioned earlier that there's, no business model attached to it, but the lead maintainer is former Mycelium wallet, right? Like if you go to the website, he only says there's 5 wallets that work, that are reproducible, that are good. And one of them is Mycelium, right? So there's some issues with incentive alignment there, and that's why it'd be great to see more contributors. Like, I completely agree with that.
Yep.
And then, I mean, last but not least, anyone who's using an Apple phone, uh, this doesn't help them at all, no matter what, because you cannot tell what's running on the phone when you download it from the App Store, right? And you can't side load. On Android, it's a different story. On Android, you can build from source. You can then pull an APK. You can check PGP signed, GPT signed APKs. And especially in the global south and whatnot, the majority of them are using Android phones. If you look in Africa, you look at Latin America. So on the Android side, it can be very helpful. But at least in America, on like the iPhone side, um, it's kind of I'm not going to say it's not a priority, but you're not really accomplishing any real goals on the App Store side. And I think if you even check on this website right now, all the 5 that he has are all Play Store. None of the App Store ones are reproducible, but like I said, you wouldn't even be able to tell if it was on iOS, anyway. So, like, that's my concerns. But then again, like, first of all, no one's perfect. There's always gonna be controversy whenever money is involved in general. I mean, you know better than most, but I have seen it firsthand as well. Um, so yeah, that's where I come from, but, I'm interested to see how it goes going forward.
Cool. Um, yeah, I agree with those concerns.
Yeah,
So I think what the ecosystem should, I hope people, cheer on is these improvements that I talked about plus others. And if we see those improvements, I think it'll be a really positive thing for the ecosystem.
agreed.
Um, and I mean, one thing just to hammer home more, relationships with the wallet developers, I think is a really important relationship to
Right.
have. Again, it's always going to be naturally a little bit contentious, but you don't have to like throw fuel on the fire. So like, and also ideally,
It shouldn't be, like,
I it should
adversarial, it should be more of a
well, ideally, like wallets see the value in this
right,
and actually contribute back, like
right,
and because building the open source software is not always straightforward. There's not like some projects don't have great instructions to follow, so you have to sort of figure it out yourself, which has caused tension. So hopefully better relationships can be built with the wallets, and some wallets hopefully see this as a great way to market their wallet as well. If they do well on these
right. That makes
in
sense.
reproducible builds,
There's
they
a
actually,
direct incentive there, yes.
yeah. And if they do that, then others will be, you know, incentivized to follow. But yeah, that's our hope with wallet scrutiny. Um, Lots of other projects we support. We don't have to go through them in detail. Summer of Bitcoin, we've been a huge funder and supporter of that, and
That's been impressive, man, that's been really impressive.
they've had a really good reach. I mentioned earlier we have funded like 6 Bitcoin Core developers, and one or let's see, we just announced Sebastian, who is taking over for Carl Dong's work, which is separating out the core of core. which has been a various attempts and projects for longer than
Right.
I've been in Bitcoin to do that. It's hard, but it's very important.
Right. So like right now when you run Bitcoin Core, you have this full wallet, you have everything kind of bundled together with the consensus code. But
Yeah.
it would be nice if we just had that consensus element, the most arguably the most important part, the foundation of the network, separate from everything else. So we could keep that stable while other iterations are happening, right?
There's numerous benefits by
Yeah.
doing that. One is just like general software engineering practice. If you isolate that, you're less likely to introduce bugs in the really, really critical stuff if you're adding something to the,
Right. We
to
don't
the
like
wallet.
accidental forks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. There's also the benefit for the contributors themselves. Contributing to like the GUI Qt wallet is a very different type of exercise than changing consensus
Right, like the
code or
interface and how it
peer-to-peer
looks.
code
Yeah.
or mempool code. So it's really two types of contributor bases. And so just being able to separate that, I think, is important. And also, there been different views and camps as to, do we need more competition for Bitcoin Core? Should there be more implementations? And the folks that think we should put all the arrows behind one project, Bitcoin Core, generally point to it would be dangerous to have independent consensus implementations because there's no spec, and the spec is Satoshi's code, and it's really complicated, and we don't want inadvertent forks. I sympathize with that view. However, it would be great if we can separate that code out so that all other parts of Bitcoin
Right.
Core can have a lot of competition and competing projects. I think that's like, my opinion, that's like the right sort of compromised approach
Right.
on that. So yeah, so Carl did a lot of great work on it. He's moved on, but he to his credit, he found his successor. So Sebastian is a developer who's going to take over that project, and we're funding him. We funded Fossil and John Attack and Gloria and folks that are working on nitty gritty peer-to-peer mempool and
That's awesome.
and privacy. Like Fossil added like Tor v3 support, and that tends to be where we want to fund the more core part of core, and less so the wallet. Not because we don't believe wallets are valuable, but just in general, there's like hundreds of wallets. So
Right.
there's no funding strategy where we can fund all of them, and we don't really want to like pick and choose.
Right.
We're Spiral's about building dev tools, infrastructure to make it easier for there to be more wallets, and require less resources to build a great wallet. That's where we focus our
A
attention.
strong foundation to build on top of.
Yep. Let's talk a little bit about LDK. I know that Jeff and Val just were on your show the other
Right.
day, so I don't have to repeat what they already talked about. But just to highlight or re-highlight things that we've learned and new initiatives within LDK project the past year. One is that we heard a lot of feedback from people using LDK. There's really two camps. So for folks not familiar with LDK, it's a full Lightning implementation. So in some ways similar to LND, CLN, Eclair. It's a full Lightning implementation, but the way it's delivered to people is not a binary. It is an API with hundreds and hundreds of methods. It gives the developer a lot of control and flexibility and power to build awesome Lightning applications. So for developers who have maybe tried to build a Lightning product, or they have one, they tend to know a lot more. Lightning's super complicated. They tend to know a lot more about Lightning, and they know what they want to get out of their application. So they tend to love LDK because they see exactly how it addresses their problems. So for that group, LDK, we have over a dozen projects actively developing with at least 2 developers on LDK right now.
That's
So
awesome.
we're seeing growth there. But there's another group of developers who it's their first experience building a Lightning application. They're experienced developers. But because of Lightning's complexity, they're at the point of just trying to like get LND or CLN up and running and connecting to peers and learning about rebalancing channels and funding and things like that. So LDK is both, I think, perceived as too complex and the reality is, you got to roll up your sleeves and do some coding, and they're not ready for that yet. So one project we started last summer is called LDK Node, and it's almost ready to be unveiled, and people can start using it. What LDK Node is, it's while LDK API is not opinionated on how a Lightning node or wallet is built,
Right.
LDK Node is a specific recipe. It is opinionated, and it is a full Lightning node presented in a API of like 6 functions.
Okay.
Very simple. I mean, like initialize, connect to peer, fund channel, send payment, like that level of simplicity. And it should make building a mobile wallet much, much easier.
Got it.
And so, for example, it's made a decision about how's block data sourced, and it can be sourced from Esplora or Electrum, which are 2 popular options for mobile. It makes it includes a BDK based on-chain wallet, because LDK API by itself doesn't have an on-chain wallet. You bring your own wallet, which if you already have your own wallet, LDK is amazing,
Right.
because LDK doesn't make you switch to LDK's idea of a wallet. But LDK Node is its own on-chain wallet.
Right. In comparison to something like LND, just to put it in perspective, is like this full integrated blob that you just like install, and it has the on-chain wallet. It has everything already.
It has everything, and that makes it much easier to get up and running,
Right.
and start sending and receive funding channels and send and receive payments, which certainly has an attraction to it. Like,
Right.
people like to get up and running fast.
Yeah.
And for a lot of uses, like, people are successfully using LND in the
Right.
space, and I mean,
It's like 80% of the network.
it's like 80% of the network. But for other applications that maybe never got off the ground, like they want to use Lightning in a new way, a
It's
different
not as
way.
extensible as something like LDK or LDK Node.
Yeah, and having having to like fork the Go code of LND
Right.
and modify that is has a number of barriers. You have to understand Go, like maintain, like that code's very
Right.
any Lightning implementation, it's very complicated, and it's just generally not something one wants to do. So anyway, but LDK Node is a full Lightning node implementation.
With an on-chain wallet.
With an on-chain wallet. And so we think it's like a great starter plan for anyone interested in building a mobile wallet.
A lot of the focus in general on LDK has been mobile, right? This idea of
the emphasis has been mobile. We've always thought, or at least I've always thought, LDK can absolutely run on servers as well.
That's what Cash App's doing.
That's what Cash App. So the primary mainnet application of LDK right now is on a server. But we want to focus on where we see the greatest need in the ecosystem. And from the start, we thought mobile was underserved, non-custodial underserved, privacy underserved. So that's where we tend to prioritize. But we can talk in a little bit about some shifting views on that as well, and some need for server work. And actually, just I can speak to some of the users of LDK who are beyond Cash App that are using it on servers.
Well, I would say, I'm curious your opinion. If the goal is a library and software that's built on top of it that's highly efficient and can work in a mobile environment, because obviously mobile has a lot of constraints already. Usually it's a lot easier for then that to be adapted to a server environment, but the reverse is not true. If something's built,
Correct.
for an always on high performance server, that thing is probably not going to work on a mobile phone. And when you talk about mobile phones in general, I mean, there's going to be billions of people that use Bitcoin that only use it from their mobile phones, right? They're never going to use a desktop computer. They're never going to use a server. They're never going to use a laptop. They're going to be doing mobile first. So for us to tackle that problem is absolutely crucial.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that's been our view, and how LDK has been architected and designed.
Right.
That and running. There's been past attempts at, or there's been attempts at running a Lightning node on the phone. It generally has produced a subpar performance experience.
Yep.
I think that can be boiled down into 2 or 3 things. One is that if you try to do pathfinding when you're finding a route for your payment on the phone, you need the gossip, or you need to know the entire network graph of all the Lightning nodes to be able to
Right.
select an optimal path. That's a lot of data. And so when there's been attempts where all of that data is downloaded to the phone, it can cause a problem when the phone doesn't run the mobile OS won't run the application in the background. And so a person opens, or if it's been like a week or a month since a person opened their wallet, it might spend dozens of seconds or even minutes downloading that network graph just to be able to route a payment. That's a showstopper user experience. That's not a mainstream. People
Right.
aren't going to tolerate that.
Any friction, people will go somewhere else.
Yep. And so, I think Jeff and Val talked about this in the show a couple days ago, but a project that Spiral worked on in the past year, it's called Rapid Gossip Sync.
Yes.
Which just shrinks the amount of information that needs to be sent to the phone dramatically. And we've measured it as less than 1 second to both download the data for the full graph and process it. So that can be done on app when the app starts up, and there's the user, it's hidden from the user. And the reason why pathfinding in the phone is important is privacy. Because if you outsource that to a third-party server, which is also often done today, that third-party server knows every single payment you make and has your entire
how the
history.
transaction flows through the Lightning Network.
Yep. So it's a huge privacy win by running it on the phone. But I think historically, that's one reason people have seen bad performance on a phone.
Right.
Hopefully, Rapid Gossip Sync eliminates that problem and solves that problem. A second reason, some wallets have used compact block filters, also known as BIP 157, 158. It's also been called Neutrino, lots of names for it.
Right.
But it is where, I love the technology. There's all kinds of great benefits. It allows you to connect directly to the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network, get your block data from the peer-to-peer network. You're not connected to one trusted server for block data. It's excellent for privacy. But the challenge on a mobile phone is that the compact block filter, the name implies that it's not the full block. It's a filter, but it's still like 3% of the block size.
Right.
So your mobile app still has to download 3% of blocks.
It's still pretty heavy for mobile.
Yeah, especially if we're able to figure out how to background this, it's easy to do that in the background. And then when you start your app, the user would not notice that.
Right.
But that's a big challenge on mobile phones. The way the OS schedules things, it's non-deterministic.
They're just killing processes left and right in the background.
Yeah, for good reasons overall. And they
mostly battery life.
Right? For battery life. Yeah. And both Android and iOS have introduced more advanced APIs over time to facilitate more backgrounding. So that's good, but it's still not like in any way guaranteed. The other problem, even if it was perfectly backgrounded, then you'd have no performance problem. But for some people around the world, maybe many people, it might be cost prohibitive because it could be 100 to 200 megabytes a month of data for these compact block filters. And, for some people's data plan, that's no big deal. Other people, that might be meaningful, it might be several dollars or even more per month. So there are trade-offs there. I'd like to see wallets that support that, but that's been another challenge in the past. I have no grand solution to that. I'd love to see wallets do it and try it out and see if number one, we can get it performant. And then, at least for some users, the data will be fine. But the solution to that though is just use Explora or Electrum. It definitely nails the performance criteria. It sacrifices a bit of privacy.
Right. If you're using someone else's.
Yeah. So,
you can be running your own.
You can run your own
Electrum.
But if we're talking about mainstream,
right, they're not going to.
Yeah, I do believe in a future where someone makes a $5-10 bomb board that can go in your home that goes in some other hardware device that you put in your home. I think that, and then 100 million people would use that, but that's still a small percentage.
Right.
I mean, that would be great. That's 100 million more people than
exactly. Yeah.
but it's still not billions of people around.
You got to operate under the assumption the majority will not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, but almost everything else about the a Lightning node is totally performant on a mobile phone. There's really, I mean, absolutely, Lightning nodes can run on a mobile phone in terms of performance. The other big challenge on a mobile phone, though, is that it's like a leaf node on the Lightning network, because it can't be a forwarding node, also known as a routing node, because you don't have it's not a server up and running 24/7. It's only when the user's operating with the wallet. So as a leaf node, that introduces liquidity challenges. As a forwarding node, your node might sort of rebalance itself. It depends on who you're connected to, how you're connected. But if you're a leaf node, it's all about your own spending patterns. And depending on your spending patterns and how you receive money, it could balance out nicely or not at all. And so it just introduces really, really tricky problems with inbound liquidity. And how do you get that inbound liquidity? Who's managing channels? Like, people who are running Lightning routers tend to, know how to operate
They're
a
professionals.
Lightning node. Yeah. I mean, they're at least a
enthusiast,
enthusiast or hobbyist who likes to do it or cares about it. For mainstream users, no way. And so, already Breeze and Phoenix and Moon wallets have shown, if you automate that and hide that from the user, it dramatically improves the user experience. So there's just no question that's needed. But
once again, friction, right? Like, you don't want, I would go as far as to say, like, if there's any kind of channel management or any kind of liquidity management, like, it's already lost for most users.
Yeah. So I think there's no question that has to be hidden from mainstream users, but it's really hard to do. And so, I mean, the good news is those wallets I mentioned, they've done it, and I think they've done a great job at first attempts at it, and
pragmatic approaches.
Yep. And I love the Phoenix wallet. I love Moon, the user experience. It's not a full Lightning.
It's not a Lightning wallet. Yeah.
It's Lightning in terms of what you see as a user. You can, you can handle Lightning invoices and pay over Lightning Network, but the actual implementation is not Lightning Network.
Every transaction is an on-chain transaction. Yep. All the balances are held on-chain.
Whereas Phoenix is a true Lightning wallet.
Yeah.
And so if fees rise on chain, like, Phoenix should outperform Moon in terms of fees.
Like, Moon has had the benefit of, over the last, and by the way, that's Moon with 2 U's for the the dozen of freaks that maybe don't know how to spell it. They've had the benefit of of very low fees on the Bitcoin network. That will probably not always be the case, and it seems with these inscription NFTs that might be getting supercharged. So
yeah, and my understanding from Dario is that, they're working on.
Yeah, he's been working on it for a while. Yeah,
been working on it for a while.
Dario's amazing. His team is really awesome.
All these
Francesca,
all these wallets we're mentioning, the people behind them have just done incredible work, because they've had to deal with very poor development tools.
Yeah,
a Lightning protocol that's still work in progress, and strive to create as good of UX as they could, and like they couldn't have done better, basically.
Just to go back for a second, not trying to be a dick, but if you go to WalletScrutiny.com, like, Phoenix Wallet, they tell you not to use Phoenix Wallet, right? So.
Another one is Blue Wallet. They call it custodial, and that's one that we're discussing.
That's what the bad faith kind of feels like,
I agree. Like, with Blue Wallet, it again, it gets to this nuance, right? Because Blue Wallet Lightning is custodial, and it's important for users to understand that. Blue Wallet on chain is non-custodial.
Right. And you could use Blue Wallet Lightning in a non-custodial way, but by default it's custodial. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's just lots of nuance, and again,
it's a difficult problem.
It's a difficult problem.
Sorry, continue.
I don't think you're a dick.
Thank you.
So, just back to, we're talking about liquidity, Lightning challenges and liquidity. And so anyway, so we have examples of wallets that did a good job of creating a user experience around that. They've tried different business models there, because they're, as an LSP, where you're providing inbound liquidity to an end user wallet, you are tying up your own money in a channel that can't get forwarding fees. So through other users. So there's a cost of capital there. So there needs to be some kind of business model. We're seeing different experiments tried. I think that's healthy. We need to see more experiments. Another development that we need to see is just a healthier LSP marketplace.
And that, because it's it seems like we were going to the same place. It's a bit of a trusted relationship. Like, yeah, like Phoenix is self-custody, but they're the node you're connecting to, and they're providing all the liquidity. So, if Phoenix disappears, if the Phoenix team disappears tomorrow, like, you can't use the wallet anymore.
Yeah,
You can get your funds out.
You can get your funds out
If they're not actively malicious, if they're not actually trying to steal your money, you can still get your funds out. But
even if they're trying to steal your money, as long as you're using the wallet regularly, like there's no watchtower involved, but
you have to keep opening the wallet.
You have to keep opening
theoretically,
the wallet. Yeah. I mean, they can't just like at one moment steal it. They as the counterparty of the channels, they could try to unilaterally close out. If you're not paying attention, then steal money. So it's definitely not perfect trust minimized. I think it's, at this moment in time, I think it's acceptable. But to get to a better state would be more LSPs that are not just tied to the wallet, but like LSPs as a business, and then they supply many different wallets.
Yes.
And then wallets that actually use wallets that use multiple LSPs simultaneously or easily be able to switch. So having standards between a wallet and LSP, I think, is important.
Then we'll have a proper marketplace, and you'll have competition and more providers. And I just want to go back real quick on Phoenix, just because I feel like they deserve a shout out. All wallets, pretty much all tools, have trade-offs, and the Phoenix team is amazing at disclosing the trade-offs on their website. Like, they go through everything for you.
Yep. They're very good actors, and they contribute in many ways, not only a great user experience Lightning wallet, but they're protocol developers as well in Lightning. So it's a great team there. But every project, every team, every wallet can definitely improve.
So LSP marketplaces, we want LSP marketplaces. We want some standards there so that there can actually be multiple providers.
And the good news is there's activity on that. There's a team at Block working on Lightning infrastructure. It hasn't been like announced in a big way yet, but Nick Slaney leads this team. He's on Twitter. He's talked about it. They've hired some really great folks. They're building out really cool Lightning infrastructure stuff, which will be talked about by that team in more detail soon. Like Synonym has a Block Tank, which is an LSP.
Right.
There's a couple of developers, a couple of teams, companies that are using LDK that are built. There's a team that's taking LDK, talking about running LDK on a server. They're running it on an enterprise HSM.
Cool.
And they're building out an LSP model. There's other users of LDK that are building LSPs as well. Some of them are building it just for themselves. Some, I think, want it to be open to others and be a business. So there's definitely activity and development on that front. I expect to see more of this to be public, be real, be usable this year, and then bleeding into next year, it'll be much better. There's been efforts for a standard spec. It's hard because there's a lot of options out there. Lightning Labs has some liquidity options. Blockstream's proposed liquidity options. Companies like Bitrefill and Breeze and Async with Phoenix, they develop their own homegrown for their own wallet. There's lots of different ideas. I think it'll be a little messy over the next few years, but I think it's generally good messy. We want a lot of experiments, and hopefully over time, the ecosystem will see what's sticking, what are good models, and they can become standards that LSPs and wallets adopt.
Awesome.
What we don't want is, one LSP to become dominant, especially if it comes from a big company,
right?
And everyone's using that, and it gives the lowest fees, the best performance, and it attracts everyone. That's not a good outcome at all for Lightning.
Massive central point of failure.
So that'll be a big development for Lightning. Yeah. So actually, getting back to I talked about LDK Node. We're developing that. That'll
Real
be
quick.
yeah.
Tony in the live chat is asking, is there an LDK LSP group? Seems like a lot of potential overlap and duplicated work that might be going on.
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, about a year ago, the Spiral team, me specifically, started looking into that because, like, if there was code that could be written that could be reused by others, that would be like certainly within scope of something Spiral would like to do. Spiral doesn't want to operate an LSP. We're not a business. We don't want to have operating capital and operating, and ongoing, servers and stuff. But yeah, our conclusion there was that not really. Also, hopefully, well, I believe Blocktank is open source. I believe stuff Breeze has done is open source. I expect stuff from Block to be open source. And then any kind of emerging spec, I would expect to be open source as well. So I'm not sure if Spiral needs to really engage on that. I think it'll come. But if anyone has specific ideas on what Spiral can do, we're all ears on that.
And it'd be great in general if even, I mean, it doesn't have to be Spiral. Like, sounds like there probably should be at least maybe a Discord group or something like that. People that are working on that.
Yeah, there is a Telegram group for the LSP spec
okay, great.
that is I mean, it's a working group. So
Right.
like if you have a
don't go in there and ask them why your Lightning payment failed.
Yeah, this is not a help desk or but if you're interested in the LSP spec, absolutely, people are welcome to join that.
Great.
Getting back to LDK Node, that's been a big project the past 8 months or so. It'll be ready soon for mobile, but as we developed it, we realized we can take the same code base and run it on a server as well, and really just need to reconfigure it. So instead of using like Explora or Electrum for block data, we just plug in Bitcoin Core for full blocks because that's the obvious choice if you're on a server,
right?
Because you're not resource constrained. You may or may not want a different local database. We'll see. But we think without that much extra effort, we can configure LDK Node on a server, which will make it much easier for users to get up and running with an LDK-based solution on a server.
Awesome.
We're also considering just going that final step with that 6 method API and just shipping a daemon.
Cool.
Actually shipping a binary, because it's not that much extra effort. And why would we do that? Well, there's a lot of features that we're building into LDK now, like Bolt 12 and async payments. Splicing is on the horizon. And things that wallets and LSPs are demanding and wanting. And we might be the only or the best solution out there for them. So it would be a shame if it's not adopted by someone who wants it just because they're intimidated by even a 6 API, a 6 function.
So
API.
In that situation, would that be like a binary that targets end users? Like an end user could just install the binary and be running it, or is that more of a developer focused thing still?
That's a good question. Is it targeted at someone who's running a business?
Yeah.
Like a Strike or Open Node or something like that, or is this for someone with a Raspberry Pi and Umbrel?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm thinking more though, the larger companies.
Right.
Here's what we can get to like Bolt 12 and async payments and the problems that it solves.
Right.
The status, but the deployment of that is really hard.
Right.
Because of interoperability.
Right.
So it's important that companies that are server based that want to support Bolt 12 and async payments that they're able to and have as many options at their disposal.
Got it.
Yep. So we're looking at that. The only other and Jeff and Val spoke about the VSS project,
right.
Which is new on the radar. A lot of people probably haven't heard of it because it's relatively new and it's not even launched yet.
Right.
But it solves an important problem, which is if you have anyone building a mobile wallet with Lightning, you have critical state that if you don't back up, you can lose your funds.
Right.
So if you only store it on the phone, you lose your phone. You are at the mercy of your peers, which might be your LSP, which you
Right.
can maybe trust,
Right.
probably trust in certain situations, but you are at their mercy to get your money back. So there needs to be a better solution. You should be assured that if you lose your phone, which all of us lose a phone at one point in our
Right.
life, that you're not going to lose your money. So with there needs to be a way to back up that state on a server in the cloud, securely and in a privacy way. So
Right.
you need to encrypt the data and then store it in the cloud. So that whoever is storing it in the cloud, they can't see it, they
Right.
can't mess with it. And that's what the VSS project is all about, solving two problems. One, that backup, and two, being able to access your wallet from multiple devices. And I think Jeff and Val talked about that a little bit. I don't believe anyone supports that today. You can't, but I think
it's something my mom would expect, that she could use it on her iPad.
I would expect
and
it.
her
I think
iPhone.
any user would expect this. A lot of users only have a mobile phone around the world.
Right.
Okay. But there's a lot of people that have a laptop and a phone, or an iPad and a phone. Right. And they would just expect to be able to access their money. They wouldn't, and they shouldn't have to expect that it's tied to a particular device. Now, of course, with Lightning, it gets super complicated. If you have two different self-sovereign clients that have your private keys messing with your Lightning state and they're not coordinating with each other, you're going to lose your money.
Right.
VSS,
because if one of your channel partners, if you broadcast a old state, it's built into the Lightning model. It's how Lightning is secure, is that they can then take your money if they see that, because that's the same way that it would look if you were cheating the partner.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's very important that multiple clients would be synchronized access to that state. And that's pretty complicated. So VSS is intended to solve both of those problems, do it in a way that's free open source library that anyone can use. And it doesn't just support LDK. It'll support like the VLS project as well.
Awesome.
And it can support other implementations, in theory, at least. So that's something we're working on. Phase 1 of that, which is like the backup phase, we hope to have ready first half of this year. And then the multi-device access will come after that.
Awesome.
Another thing I wanted to mention, another thing we've learned and observed, anyone who's been in Lightning, it's obvious, Lightning's really complicated. Developing Lightning is really complicated. So we're building these tools, but quite a few developers in Bitcoin went through, I think everyone's read Mastering Bitcoin who's into Bitcoin.
Right.
But then a lot of developers went through Jimmy Song's Programming Bitcoin workshop.
Right.
And it packs a lot of punch in 2 days. It's a drinking from the fire hose. It's a really intense 2 days. I took it about 5 years ago. And it was a really, really good course that gave you a foundation, leveled up your knowledge, and gave you a great foundation to go learn more. And that's missing in Lightning. So a few of us have started a project recently this year to develop a Programming Lightning workshop, and sort of in the same vein as Programming Bitcoin, but for Lightning. And we actually did a first test run here in Nashville at Bitcoin Park.
Let's go.
And it was a great first test. We only have like 5% of the content done, but we tested out. We use Replit as the environment. We use Rust as the language, which we're a little unsure of. We don't want to have students get tripped up over language details, and Rust is fairly sophisticated language. But if it can work, great, because a lot of great libraries in Bitcoin are Rust.
Right.
But if it doesn't work, that's fine.
Including BDK and LDK.
Yeah. But also those projects acknowledge not everyone is a Rust developer. So they support language bindings, they support Java and Swift and Python, etc. So maybe we have to do this project in Python, to be determined, very early stages.
Awesome.
But if anyone is interested in being a guinea pig early student, let us know, or contribute to the project. We can go over quite a bit more about lightning complexity. How much time do you have, Matt?
I'm all yours. It's you. Let's keep going.
Okay. Maybe 20 more minutes.
Let's do it.
Let's start. So I wanted to talk about the more challenges of developing lightning applications and wallets, and especially around user experience. So here's one thing that might be, or I don't think it's controversial, but it might be controversial. I think lightning should be hidden from users.
Okay.
I don't think hide the lightning. We should.
You're just spending Bitcoin.
You're spending Bitcoin. You send me Bitcoin.
That's why there's
I
a
send
lot
you
of
Bitcoin. I buy.
There's a lot of complaints about Moon and architecturally, but the single biggest thing they did was you just scan a QR code and it just pays it.
Yeah.
The user doesn't have to know how they're paying it.
Moon did a great job with UX.
Yeah.
Great job. But example to improve it is if you want to receive, it's a tabbed design. So you're presented with on-chain Bitcoin. I forget what vocabulary they use, what copy they use, but it's basically
Bitcoin and Lightning. I think
it says Bitcoin and Lightning, but so it's
which is even more confusing because it's I do so much work in the education space, and people are like, "What? So is this not Bitcoin? What is Lightning?"
Yeah, right? I totally get it too. Anyone new, because it is a really good user experience, but they get tripped up on that. They think, oh, is this? They think of it as Litecoin or some kind of other coin. And they certainly don't understand the difference between on-chain and they just don't understand the benefits, the technology.
Right. Nor really should they.
Nor should they.
Yeah.
So there's been efforts from the design community and the community at large as part of that, for a unified QR code. Cash App, as a commercial product, made a big splash of that. And to Cash App's credit, they launched a unified QR code. Actually, to Dario's credit and Moon, they launched a unified QR code, I think 2 years ago, but they took it back because a lot of other wallets in the ecosystem couldn't successfully send to it.
Right, you need wallet support. Yeah.
Yeah, there's BIP21, which has been around forever. It's on-chain address based, but you have extra information. You can include a Lightning invoice,
which is why it's useful because it's backwards compatible. So if you pay from an old on-chain wallet or just any on-chain wallet that doesn't have Lightning, they don't even see the Lightning component. But as long as new Lightning wallets know what to look for, they can then pull the Lightning invoice and pay via Lightning.
Exactly. So there's been decent BIP21 support from exchanges and stuff, but Moon had launched it, pulled it back.
It was too early.
It was too early. Then there was both this community effort to describe this problem, the opportunity, listed out a bunch of exchanges and wallets who supported it, who didn't. It was crowdsourced. People could update that. Cash App made a big splash and then actually launched with it and did a bunch of testing themselves. And now we see BTC Pay following, and I think Zeus followed, and
all the good Lightning wallets.
There's some other, and Moon. I don't know if it's default, but I think they added the option.
It's in the settings. Yeah.
And I think there's a few others too. So
and I think same with BTC Pay Server. I think it might not default to it. It might be in settings, but that's a little bit more realistic because if you're operating a BTC Pay Server, you're a little bit more technical than a Moon user. You'd like to see it default in the actual apps.
Yeah. So there's good momentum for that, and absolutely it's a better user experience to just not have to think about that. And all you're thinking about is I'm receiving Bitcoin.
I will say, hat on the table, Steve, when my good friend Miles Suter told me that BIP21 support was absolutely crucial, I was a little bit dismissive. I personally thought we'll just move to Lightning in general. So there will be one QR code, but it'll be a Lightning QR code. But I will say, now that it's actually rolled out, and I think we were talking about it specifically with the BTC Pay Server point of sale, it is so clean. It is so nice. I love it. I think it's a massive UX improvement.
That's great to hear.
Yeah,
because it is the simple detail, but it's those simple details that are massive for mainstream adoption.
100%.
I think I've seen, I still never personally experienced paying for something in El Salvador, but I've seen videos where using
it's a clusterfuck.
Yeah. I mean, the point of sale, the merchant, the person behind that app really doesn't know what they're doing.
Right.
And because it's complicated.
Yeah.
And that as you said, clusterfuck.
Yeah. You see Bitcoiners, they have to take their phone and go to change it to Lightning, and it just becomes a whole
Yeah.
process.
So small detail, but really needed. But just in general, I think Lightning it's a technology layer that us, developers and enthusiasts and early adopters of Bitcoin can get excited about and talk about. But I really think it should be hidden from, I just think mainstream users don't care. They just want to send and receive money, and that being Bitcoin.
Yep.
And
They're just sending Bitcoin. They're receiving Bitcoin.
I also I'm not sure what you mentioned the other day that you or actually it was on the podcast I think with Jeff and Val that you go from like being enthusiastic about Lightning and then back to on-chain, and I totally understand that psychology. I mean, there's days where I get a little like depressed about all the challenges of Lightning, but overall very optimistic.
Well, like the other day, Steve, we were at Bitcoin Park. We had our open house, our monthly meetup. Like we have the Bit Devs to the listeners. We have Bit Devs and then we have open house. But we had open house. We had like 200 people here. This guy comes up to me and he just started his Lightning node and he's asking how he can get inbound liquidity, right? And I go into this whole thing for like 10 minutes, and then at the end, I'm like, I'll just open a channel to you. And like that's when I get lower on the ebbs and flows. And then obviously when I see Lightning out there in the wild and it's working, I get very bullish.
Well, that's why. Yeah, I don't think Lightning becomes mainstream unless there's a healthy LSP market.
Exactly.
And
it's still
business
early.
models work out, and it's fair to end users, and they're getting value, and LSPs have a business model, etc. It's I mean, if we assume Lightning successful, I think most people's Bitcoin experiences will be dominated by Lightning. The vast majority of their payments, their interactions will be Lightning. But again, it's a technology layer underneath. Just like when I'm using a web browser, I'm not like constantly seeing or thinking about all the different protocol layers underneath that. I just use the software.
Makes sense to me.
Where in on-chain, I think there'll be, I mean, you can just do the math. I mean, unless we increase the block size, like there's only so many transactions that can occur.
Right.
And if you get like super broad adoption, billions of people, you can just do the math. Only so many can have one on-chain UTXO for a Lightning channel, let alone like savings wallet, etc. So I think there'll be a lot of users that are on Fedimint or something like that, some kind of other technology where you're sharing UTXOs.
Right.
And they'll just not interact with on-chain.
Right. Most there will be people that presumably only use Lightning and never touch the chain.
Yep. So let's see. Let's talk. Oh, another user experience problem with Lightning is around you do have this liquidity, and so people not familiar with Lightning, you can think of like an abacus. So if Matt and I have a channel between the two of us, we might have 100,000 satoshis on each side, but even there's 200,000 satoshis in that channel, I can't receive 200,000 satoshis through that channel. Matt can only slide 100,000 over to me. And that's just not how people think about money. That's not how their $20 bill in their wallet works.
It's hard to conceptualize.
So one, how do you hide that? But two, what do you do technically when I actually want to receive a payment of 500,000 satoshis and I don't have enough of this inbound liquidity? So that's where an LSP can come into play. They can on the fly do that, like a just-in-time injection of liquidity. They could open a new channel. They could use splicing, which is technology that's in development. But there's still the problem of like, do we have to wait for block confirmations on chain?
Right.
How many? 1, 3, 6? Even one, it's a really bad user experience. And for the end user, it's like, why do sometimes when I receive money, it's instant and it's amazing. And other times I have to wait a long time.
Right.
And again, if they're hidden from Lightning and all these technology and all these challenges, it's just a weird experience that sometimes, most of the time it's fast. Sometimes it's really slow. Right. So, one solution that's been deployed by various wallets and LSPs is ZeroConf.
Right.
And I think that's in this instance, that can be a good choice because In this case of zero conf, unlike on chain, you as the recipient, you're not trusting the person sending you the money. You're actually trusting your LSP, which is a very different trust relationship, because all of a sudden you can, like if some random stranger comes to your house to like, or if let's see, yeah, if someone comes and buys like your couch or something and sends you money, you don't know them and they leave and you never see them again.
Yeah.
If they double spend you, you're out your money. But in this case, over Lightning, if you're accepting zero conf, you're not trusting them. You're trusting that your LSP doesn't steal your money. And I think that it's far more reasonable in most situations that you can trust your LSP because you're using them on an ongoing basis. They probably have a reputation and a business model to protect. They're unlikely to double spend you then. But it is a real trade-off that you're making. So recently there was a new proposal called Swap in Potentiam, which was discussed at Nashville BitDevs, which is an alternative, which is pretty interesting. It's great. It's a good tool to have in the tool shed. It's an alternative to zero conf here. It can provide the speed and instantaneous benefit of zero conf without the risk of zero conf, but it does introduce a different type of trade-off. There's actually two trade-offs, and I think one of them wasn't discussed at BitDevs, but the first is that it encumbers the money that's coming in with a 2 of 2, where your LSP has one of the keys, for a period of time with a time lock. So during that period of time, you do not have unilateral control of your funds. You're trusting your LSP to always co-sign for you during that period of time. If for some reason they go offline, they become untrustworthy, you still haven't lost your funds permanently. You just have to wait for the timeout. Then you have access. So that seems like a reasonable, acceptable approach. But of course, the other trade-off is once that timeout is done, then you can no longer use that for instant injection. So it still doesn't fully solve that. Problem. But anyway, there's solutions in the works to address that, which is a big UX
But it reduces the trust significantly.
It reduces the trust. Well, what do you mean by that?
Because it's a 2 of 2 with a time lock.
Yeah. Oh, meaning it improves that trust relation. Yeah. Agreed. So, and I think those two can also be used together too. They're not competing. You could apply both. You could like prefer swap in Potentiam, and if that's not available, if there's no coins available to do that, then you could zero conf. Maybe the last thing we talk about. Let's talk about Bolt 12, LN URL, and just like what are problems being solved there? Because like Bolt 11 has.
So Bolt 11 is the normal invoice that we're used to right now.
Yeah, which is, I mean,
Lightning invoice.
It's served a good purpose. It has a lot of us doing Lightning payments, but it has a number of problems. One is that it's like invoice based. So it's really it's pretty good for merchant customer relationship where a customer is paying a merchant, but for like peer-to-peer money, if I'm just paying you back or whatever, and you're just like,
you have to text me, say, send me an invoice. Yeah, I have to text you back, send the invoice.
Anyone familiar with like Venmo or Cash App or anything like that, it's just not how you interact with someone. Even if it's not a friend, even if it's like a babysitter or something. A babysitter is not. I mean, yes, it's a business, but it's not like they have like.
Like have accounting send me an invoice.
They don't have a back end system, and they don't they don't think in terms of invoices. There's lots of like jobs like that where you pay people as well.
The babysitter's not running a BTC Pay server.
Right. So so traditionally you might hand them a $20 bill or write them a check, or today you might Venmo them or use Cash App, something like that. And you can't do that with Bolt 11. You have to do this invoice dance.
You want a push payment. You want to be able to push a payment instead of.
Right. Yeah. So what? So one thing Bolt 12.
I want to look up just Moneyball in my wallet or whatever and just pay.
Yeah. So one thing in Bolt 12 does is it has the notion of an offer, which is a reusable. Oh, another thing about Bolt 11, you should only use that invoice once.
Are there reusable Bolt 11s?
Well, if you try to pay it again, the money can be stolen along the path.
But usually the wallet will just say it failed.
That's not widely known, I don't think, in Lightning either.
So it's, I guess your wallet is just protecting you from that. They know it's already paid, so they're not sending it, right?
Yeah. But I mean, if, yeah. So I don't, in practice, I've not heard of it being a problem, but
Right.
like if you did try to pay it again, it could be stolen.
Got it.
Also, it could be stolen, but like, I don't know if like intermediate nodes are like
Right.
actively looking to steal money.
But in practice, what you usually see is if you try and pay an invoice that's already paid, it says this invoice is already paid, you can't pay it for the end user.
Yeah. Although I think that's because it actually timed out.
Got it.
So there's the notion of an expiration date in Bolt 11 invoices as
Right.
well, for multiple reasons, but that's one. Now, Bolt 12 offers are reusable payment identifiers.
Right.
So they solve a use case of tipping. They also solve a use case of where I just want to send you a payment and not do this invoice dance.
Right.
So
And donations is really big for it too.
donations,
really
tipping, and just sort of the Venmo Cash App use case.
Right.
So getting rid of this interactive dance with the person receiving the money. So massive UX wins for these very popular use cases that people use money for and how they transmit money. So it unlocks that. It has another benefit of we talked about the unified QR code. A challenge with that is the density of the QR code. The more information you put in a QR code, the more dense that QR code. And all of a sudden, phones that were scanning it fine, all of a sudden struggle. And you might have to like spend 20 seconds like zooming in perfectly, and it's not a good experience.
Especially in the global south where it's old Android phones with bad cameras.
Yeah. And sometimes it just won't scan it at all.
Right.
So so there's a threshold there. And another beautiful thing about a Bolt 12 offer, it's much less data than a Bolt 11 invoice. So it's a smaller QR code. Also, with Lightning, what you can embed in a Bolt 11 invoice are routing hints.
Yes. Basically where my private channels are to receive.
Yep. And there's another technology called blinded paths that's being developed. And if you include that, it's more data. And so in Bolt 11, it'll just break in the sense that it'll be way too much data to get the privacy you want, and the payment success rate you want by providing all these hints for paths. It's too much data. The QR code gets too big. With Bolt 12, it pushes that off to a second step in the process. It's not in the offer. There are some paths though in the Bolt 12 offer. Those are onion message paths to do this initial communication to receive an invoice.
I think Jeff mentioned that, which was a part I did not realize, where in that situation, if those paths change or those routing nodes change, then you actually need a new QR code or a new text string, right? Like,
yeah, sadly.
So they're reusable to a point, but there's also still going to be
reusable to a point. So like if you, in practice, it might be that you only need to include a path to your LSP. Like most users will be on a mobile phone. You'll have one LSP.
Right.
And the path will lead to that LSP, and that LSP will be around for a long time.
So it'll be pretty stable.
And it'll be pretty stable. So from a UX perspective, I think that's not it'll be fine and not a big problem. Privacy, it's not perfect.
Right. That's not great. Yeah.
So for people who are, who really need like stronger levels of privacy, they might have to choose a particular type of wallet.
Right.
That is more privacy sensitive, uses multiple LSPs, uses more sophisticated blinded paths, multiple blinded paths, etc. And then maybe you'd have a little bit of a degradation on like your Bolt 12 offer might have to change,
update it
every once in a while. It seems like it's
still a massive win if you're updating it once a year or every 6 months or whatever.
Yeah. But with Bolt 12, with the offer, if I'm sending you money, I somehow obtain your offer, and we can talk about that in a second, like different ways I might find it. But I scan it, then my wallet would reach out to your wallet over onion messages to fetch the invoice. So there's still an invoice involved, but it's hidden from the user. And because it's done as this like computer to computer communication, it can be bigger. It can include lots of blinded paths and route hints and data, and you don't suffer the cost of the QR code. And so that's so reducing the data in the QR code is another benefit of Bolt 12. Let me talk a little bit about async payments as well, which is it's a orthogonal topic, but it's related and it'll be integrated as part of Bolt 12. But a huge problem with mobile phones is that, again, they don't guarantee background access to the CPU. So if my phone is in my pocket, which is where people's phones typically are, or sitting on this table right now, if someone's sending me money right now while I'm on this podcast, it likely fails over Lightning, because with Lightning, unlike on-chain Bitcoin, you have both the sender and the recipient have to sign a transaction, which means accessing the private key. You have to be online. And even though my phone's connected to the internet right now, the iPhone's typically doesn't wake up my wallet.
It goes back to the processes in the background.
Sign the transaction and to receive the money. It's a big problem. Because again, to the end user, they don't know any of these details. They don't care.
Just know they're not getting their money.
They don't know they're not getting their money. They want their money. And it's also not what they're accustomed to with other
everything
apps.
Even on-chain Bitcoin.
Right. So it's really, it's bad, and also just not what they're used to. So async payments, Matt Carallo proposed it fall of 2021. A solution to this. He sketched out a high-level solution that looked promising. We discussed it last year in Oakland when we got Lightning Protocol developers together from all 4 major implementations, and people seemed to like the concept. I'd call it like it generally got a concept ACK, or like approach acknowledgement. But there are a lot of details left to be figured out. So starting a few months ago, Val on our team took on the project. She wants to build async payments, and I had been looking for a developer. There's a lot of excitement about doing it, but to find someone who has free time was hard. And finally, Val signed up for it, so I'm really excited about that. And so I think it was covered a little bit on the other show, but I mean, high level how it works. If I'm sending you money, and we're both mobile phone users, I would notify my LSP that I'm sending an async payment.
Right.
It then notifies your LSP, and your phone might be in your pocket.
Right.
And basically, when your phone wakes up, your LSP will know that. It will tell my LSP, and then the payment will be
sent.
We're
ready to go. Send it away.
Right. And so there's been a proposal in the past from Breeze to do something kind of similar, but it's where it's held at the end of the last hop instead of the first hop.
Right.
And the problem, so it's trying to solve the same problem.
Right.
But the problem with that solution is that it ties up liquidity for an unbounded amount of time. That whole route, that liquidity cannot be used for forwarding or access.
You turn your phone on or open the app.
Yeah. So it could be hours, days, weeks.
Right.
Because you might create a really long timeout too. So a huge win with this proposal is that it's held by the sender's LSP. No one's liquidity is being tied up.
It hasn't even gone down the path yet.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it is complicated.
Right.
So it requires trampoline or something like trampoline. Trampoline ends up being a good solution, because when I triggered that payment to send to you, my LSP is waiting to hear from your LSP. But my I've gone offline.
Right.
So I can't retry a payment. So like if that first path doesn't work and you need to retry a new path, I no longer am available. I also don't want to trust my LSP to do this, because I don't want to lose my privacy.
Right.
And I don't want to give up my keys or whatever. So Trampoline is a good solution that allows it to retry while being trust minimized.
Great.
And privacy sensitive. And then it can be from a UX perspective, it can be incorporated into Bolt 12, so that when I scan a Bolt 12 offer, it will actually basically have a flag, an indicator saying do you as a recipient, do you want async payments or not? And if you do, then my wallet goes down that path, and it'll initially use key send, so because your phone's offline,
right? So
it's not in a position to generate an invoice,
right?
So even if I send you an onion message saying, "Hey, I'm ready. I want to pay you. I want to pay your offer," your phone's offline, and you can't trust your LSP to generate an invoice, because
Right.
then all of a sudden you're trusting your LSP
Right.
to make sure that it's the invoice that gets you paid versus your LSP to get paid.
Yeah.
So by using KeySend, you avoid that invoice dance. A drawback with KeySend is that there's no proof of payment. I think you guys talked about that the other day.
There's no receipt.
There's no receipt. As far as I know, I think it's important, but as far as I know, no one's really using receipts right now in the space. So I don't think it's like, I think it's an enormous win to enable people to receive money on their phone.
But to be clear, I mean,
and it's a good trade-off.
Dispatch is a podcasting 2.0 show, so I receive thousands of KeySend payments a day. It works.
Yeah, that's great.
Don't
that's
have
great
a
to
receipt, but
and there's potential for receipts. Like AJ
Right.
Towns, like Val challenged the community, like, hey, can someone come up with an idea? How do we get receipts? Maybe using PTLCs or other technology. And AJ's already sketched out a solution, which looks promising. Now, even if that solution ends up working, it depends on PTLCs. That's going to take years to develop and deploy. But great. I mean, that's how
slow and steady.
Slow and steady.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's high level how async payments works. It solves arguably the biggest UX problem for mobile Lightning. I mean, people who are having good experience, I mean, there's definitely good experiences to be had with Lightning today, but they're often custodial,
right?
Or the person's running their own umbrella or something,
right? And
which are totally valid
something.
and totally fine. But if the long term, if we only have custodial Lightning, then we lose most of the benefits of Bitcoin, censorship resistance, privacy, etc. And so being able to deliver great user experiences on non-custodial mobile is essential. It's 10 times harder technically. We've outlined a bunch of the problems. The good news is there's generally good solutions in the works. And every year we're going to see more of those delivered. So the async payments, the hope is that this year Val can come out with a demo that demonstrates that it works, simultaneously complete a spec that can get feedback from fellow protocol developers. I don't expect much. I mean, as long as it works as we're currently thinking, we don't come up across any more hiccups. I don't expect it to be controversial in terms of the spec. So it's just a matter of finding another implementation in addition to LDK that implements it. That'll usually go through, finding some bugs and problems. And then hopefully 2024, that can become, go live and start to become popular. But with both Bolt 12 and async payments, it's a really big challenge for deployment. Because, ideally every wallet, every LSP, and even every node in the net, basically every node gets updated.
It's a massive interoperability challenge.
Yeah. And it does, not everything has to be updated for certain situations to work, which is there's going to be a transition period, but it's a big challenge, and it's a UX challenge because when you add this to your wallet, you have to anticipate sometimes when you're sending to someone or receiving from, like if you're receiving from someone, sometimes they are going to be Bolt 12 compatible, sometimes they're not, and you have to handle that.
Right.
So I've chatted with folks in the Bitcoin design community. I think a good resource that can be developed is put some smart people together, people who understand the tech, but also design oriented, to think through what are best practices for a wallet to approach this, because everyone's going to face the same question.
Right.
And I spent some quality time with Stephen DeLorme this week in Nashville at Bitcoin Park. And I really, he has some really great thinking around this. So I think a few of us are going to put together some of those thoughts, and then share them with wallets to get their feedback. Hopefully it's a good resource for wallets. I recently started a Bolt 12 Discord community that's public. Right now I've invited people who develop wallets, are designers, that are Bolt 12 advocates, and trying to develop a rhythm there, but just a place where we can talk about the problem, like all the problems ahead of us.
Right.
We all want to make it happen, come up with a plan. And once we develop a rhythm, I'll publicize that more and get more people involved in that. It's, we want every wallet and every LSP to adopt this. But I think if, this year, I think I'm optimistic we can get, half a dozen or more wallets implementing it. and launching it. And at least between those wallets, you'll be able to use it, and then hopefully set ourselves up for next year really going broad, like demonstrate these benefits we're talking about. It's all about running code, right? I mean, we can talk about the benefits, understand them in theory, but let's actually see it in practice. Hopefully see that this year, and then next year see really broad adoption.
Awesome. I'm excited, Steve. I'm feeling bullish. I'm on the bullish curve of my lightning feels.
Oh, and also, I think a lot of people think that Bolt 12 is still just like an academic project by one protocol developer, Rusty, who proposed it. But there's been tremendous progress.
Right.
LDK, CLN, and Eclair all are nearly complete with Onion messages, Bolt 12, and like Bolt 12 invoices and blinded paths. And I think in the next, well, CLN supported this for a while, but they're updating the implementation to the latest spec. That should be available soon. Eclair should be available soon. So should LDK. Soon, meaning like on the order of like a few months.
That's fucking cool.
And even LND has a solid plan in place where some developers have gotten some PRs into LND that will allow an external daemon to handle Onion messages in Bolt 12, and at least allow LND users to send Bolt 12 payments, which is critical for interoperability, because all the exchanges and custodians that support Lightning today and run LND, it's important for them to be able to fund and send money from there to a mobile wallet that's non-custodial that might not be on LND and use a different implementation. So it's really important for that use case to be unlocked. That would be unlocked with this solution, and then hopefully, we'll show how much demand there is for Bolt 12 and how awesome it is, and get it, as a higher priority to merge it all into LND.
That's really good, Steve. I'm excited. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. We're over 2 hours. I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it.
It's been great.
I hope everyone out there has enjoyed listening, found it helpful. Can we put it on the record that we'll record again at least once a year? We'll do updates, but maybe more.
Yeah, on the record.
On the record?
Yeah.
I would love to have you back.
I'd love to come back.
It's always a fun time. Thank you for coming to Nashville and visiting, and hope you come back to Nashville as well. And I usually wrap it up with final thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience? I mean, I think
I'll just show Bitcoin Bark again. I think it really has been a good experience. I'm not saying that just because I'm on your show right now, but it's been great. So I would recommend people find a way to work Nashville into your travel. And I think you guys have some kind of plans for, I mean, clearly people in Nashville and the local area can become members and come here a lot, but even visitors, I think you have some kind of plan. So definitely learn more about Bitcoin Park and check it out. Awesome. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, freaks, for tuning in, joining the live chat, supporting the show. Reminder, we're going to have a show Super Bowl Sunday before the Super Bowl with Casey on ordinals and inscriptions. And also, I remembered after one of the episodes this week that I haven't mentioned at all. I know I've been giving you guys a lot of content, but also my new series in partnership with Bitcoin Magazine, Freedom Money, is out. So if you just search Freedom Money in YouTube, the first 2 episodes are there. One was with Gigi, and the other was with Roya. Roya is an Afghan. Everyone knows Gigi already, I assume, but Roya is an Afghan tech entrepreneur. She's absolutely inspiring and amazing. So consider listening to that. There's going to be 4 more episodes of that as well. I love you all. Thank you, Steve.